I arrived at the German-Polish border on a late autumn afternoon. The sky the color of old paper left too long under glass. From Berlin, I had taken a regional train to Szczecin, where Anya picked me up in a battered dark blue hatchback, its paint flaking from years of winter road salt. Anya was half German, half Polish, a few years older than me. She worked as a field supervisor for a migratory bird count project. I was a freelance translator and subtitler for a small Berlin-based film crew, temporarily hired to tag along, record local terminology, and interview older residents in the area. "You'll like it here," Anya said as we left the city. The paved road narrowed into a black ribbon, threading between waterlogged fields. "If you can ignore the smell of the marsh and the cold, it's not bad." Wind rattled the windshield, carrying the scent of mud, the smoke of a lone chimney somewhere out in the flats, and the damp resin smell of far-off forest. My phone's GPS flickered in and out as we crossed thick walls on pine. At a bend in the road, Anya nodded toward something ahead. "There it is, Radom." I looked up. Rising above the tree line, stark against the gray sky, was a white sphere, smooth as an eggshell, sitting atop a concrete base, surrounded by a rusting chain-link fence. I'd seen pictures of Cold War-era Radoms at Teufelsberg near Berlin, but this one was smaller and somehow newer. "Station R14, Anya said. That's what they called it back in DDR days. It's been abandoned for years. At night, sometimes it breathes." "What do you mean, breathes?" "It makes noise." She smiled thinly, both hands firm on the wheel. "People say it's just the wind, pressure changes, something like that." We stayed at a small riverside inn run by a woman named Lida. The hallways smelled faintly of floor wax. The blankets were heavy, and my window looked out on drooping reeds over Blackwater. Over tea, Lida asked what had brought us here. Anya told her about the bird counts. Lida nodded, then added, "Don't stay out past 11. "Why not?" Anya asked. "It gets cold," Lida said, cutting the conversation short. She set down the key, our tea, and a basket of dense rye bread. "The east wind tonight." That afternoon, we headed into the field. Anya led me down a damp forest track, wet grass soaking through the tops of my boots. The further we walked, the clearer I could hear a low, steady murmur from somewhere ahead. At first, I thought it was traffic, but there were no roads here. The trail opened into a clearing. There it was again, the white sphere, larger now, its surface taut and seamless like the belly of some sleeping animal. "We count cranes and geese flying through here," Anja said, raising her binoculars. "For the past 2 years, the cranes have changed course. They avoid the stretch." She gestured toward the Radom. "They veer in a nearly perfect arc, about a 700-meter radius. At the arc's edge, they climb, like hitting an invisible wall." She showed me a heat map on her tablet. Migration paths in colored bands, with a conspicuously pale circle around R14. It made the back of my neck prickle. "That's why the local heritage committee tells us not to dig up the past," Anya said. "They're afraid we'll tarnish something they've been proud of for decades." "You think this invisible wall has something to do with the Radom?" "No idea. R14's been shut down for years, but do you hear that?" I listened. There was a layer of sound, or not quite sound, under the wind. Not a hum exactly, but a faint pressure against my eardrums. When the breeze fell still, it became sharper, warmer, like standing near a subwoofer with the volume almost all the way down. Sometimes it's stronger, Anya said, eyes still on the binoculars. Usually around 3 in the morning. You said it breathes. Yeah, like something sleeping in there. That first night, I woke to the faint rattle of the glass on my bedside table. At first, I thought a truck must have passed, but there were no roads nearby. The wall clock said 3:17. My phone, which kept time from the network, read 3:09. Probably just a quirk of being this close to the border, I told myself. Time signals can get messy here. I sat up and pressed my ear toward the window. The outside was still, just the reeds brushing each other in the dark. And then I heard it. A low, sustained swell, like air being pushed through a pipe miles long. It wasn't a distinct noise so much as a pressure rising and falling, each cycle maybe 12 seconds. The glass rattled again. Water along the rim broke into tiny ripples, then settled. The next morning over breakfast, I told Anya. She raised her eyebrows. Usually it's 3:03, she said, but you're lucky to hear it all the way from town. 3:17 is odd. We ate at a small cafe by the market. Lita was behind the counter, her eyes distant. When I asked about the radome, she shrugged. You young people like strange things. We old ones just want winter to pass quickly. And summer, not to burn the forest. Did you ever work near it? Anya asked. My brother did, Lita said, tapping her spoon on the rim of the cup. He told me, it's an eye to the sky. Later, the eye closed, but the ear stayed open. She smiled without warmth. You can hear it every night. That afternoon, we visited a man named Kopech, a retired radar engineer from the old DDR days. He lived in a small timber yard outside town, his back slightly hunched, his hair pure white, but his eyes bright. The walls of his living room were hung with black and white photos, guard posts, parabolic antennas, hand-drawn schematics. R14 was never meteorology, he rasped. It was a radome covering an old air defense antenna. In the late 90s, they tried a low-frequency infrasonic system to measure the atmospheric boundary layer. No one admitted it, but we saw the coils, the pressure chambers, the new composite plates. Infrasonic? I asked. The word sounded like something out of a film. Below 20 hertz, he said. The ear can't hear it, but the body can. Many things can make it. Wind, pipes, the surface of the dome. You can turn them into an instrument if you know how to play. But even a tiny misalignment, an intake, a joint, and it will play its own song. And now? Anya asked. Now it's abandoned, but the structure's still there. If the wind is right, the pressure right, it will breathe. The kids have a name for it now, the white sound. Biały dźwięk. Has anyone gotten sick from it? I asked, half joking. Headaches, nausea, birds change their routes. Sheep cluster like they're tied with an invisible rope. He paused, his gaze narrowing. Some say they hear their own names being called. The last sentence hung in the air like a cold draft. That night, Anya told me to bring my small audio recorder, a Zoom H1N I usually used for interviews. She brought a tripod, her binoculars, and a cheap decibel meter. We parked at the forest's edge around 2:30 a.m., then walked quietly down into the clearing. The sky was clear, the stars scattered like grains of salt across a black pane of glass. The radome stood still, pale as ice. We set the recorder on a flat rock, its microphone pointing toward the dome. Anya checked her watch. 2:58. I breathed in the smell of damp grass and rusted metal. At 3:01 the pressure began. The same low presence I'd heard from town, but stronger now, thicker. Not exactly a sound, but something my ribcage seemed to register. The decibel meter flickered at 36, 38, barely changing. Whatever was happening wasn't about volume. 3:03. A breeze that came from nowhere brushed across the grass. Then a low tone, faint but clear, like a cello string being bowed in the next room. It lasted 6 or 7 seconds, ebbed away, then rose again. My back was damp with sweat despite the cold. Anya's hand tightened on my arm. She whispered, "Do you hear words?" "What words?" "Never mind," she said quickly. "Maybe I'm imagining it." I stared at the radome. When the wind shifted, a thin veil of mist curled near the fence, like the exhale of something huge. The recorder's red light blinked steadily. On my phone's spectrum analyzer, a thin ridge appeared around 19 to 20 hertz, swelling and dipping on a slow cycle. There was also a narrow black scar cutting across the spectrum, like a knife mark running in an arc. At 3:09, my imaginary bedside glass was rattling again in my head. I remembered the time discrepancy from the night before. "What time is it?" I asked. 3:11, Anya said. "My phone says 3:04. She frowned. "GPS is glitchy here. Time sync too, not unusual." She hesitated, then added softly, "But 7 minutes is a lot." We recorded for another 15 minutes, then packed up. I thought I'd lie awake, replaying the sound in my head. But the moment my head hit the pillow, I dropped under like a stone into deep water. The next morning, we met Marek, a freight train engineer Anya knew from her permit requests. He was about 40 with a square face, work-roughened hands, and diesel under his nails. "You want to know if a train passed last night?" he asked. "None. Maintenance schedule." "So the hum wasn't a train," Anya said. Marek shrugged. "Nobody says it is. A train sounds like a train. That thing is different. Makes the glass in my cabin tremble, just a little. First time I thought it was my heartbeat skipping." "You ever gone past R14? Around 3? I asked. "Once. 2 years ago." His eyes went flat, looking out over the empty platform. "There was a strange fog. Didn't move like normal fog. It stood in a column like chimney smoke, but didn't drift. I went by and thought I saw someone standing in it. Not a person, just a person-shaped space." "You stopped the train?" "I'm not an idiot," he said, with a dry laugh. I sped up. We listened to the recording back in the inn's small dining room. The window cracked open to the cold. Lyda brought out an apple tart and lingered in the doorway, listening. The file began with the faint sound of distant insects, the wind, and then the slow rise in pressure. At the 6:02 mark, a note appeared, a long, low tone, just slightly warped, like a cassette tape starting to drag. I pulled the waveform into my laptop's analysis software, zooming in on the spectrum. A bright ridge sat at 19.8 hertz, swelling every 12 or 13 seconds. And there it was again, the thin black scar slicing across the display, a narrow, twisting absence. "Here," Anya said, her voice tight but steady. "Listen from the 9-minute mark." We put on headphones. 9:11, low ambient pressure. 9:12, the black scar deepened. 9:13, and then so faint it could have been a memory, a smear of sound. I almost didn't want to admit what I thought I heard. It was like a vowel, followed by a blurred consonant. Not a word, not exactly, but it had the shape of speech. "Imagination," I said, trying to convince myself. Anya nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Could be. Lyda rested her hand on the back of my chair and sighed softly. Sounds like my brother calling my name at night, she said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. I hate it. Every time it calls, I lie still, count my heartbeat, and wait for morning. That afternoon, Anya wanted to walk the perimeter of the fence around R14 to find good spots for sensors. The fence was tall and tightly meshed, dotted with rusted signs in both Polish and German. Nie chodzić, betreten, verboten, do not enter. In one corner, a fallen pine leaned against the wire, pushing a shallow groove into the ground. Look here, Anya said, pointing at the dirt. No recent human tracks, but the grass by the edge is pressed down. Animals? I suggested. Maybe. She raised her binoculars over the fence, scanning. No nests, and listen. She froze. I heard it too. A small click, sharp and metallic. Not the fence, not a twig breaking. More like a latch being lifted. Wind, I said, but without conviction. We kept moving. On the north side of the dome, in a patch of coarse grass, I noticed a sunken circle, about 2 meters across. Inside it, the grass stood straighter, as if it had been propped up. It looked like a crop circle turned inside out. I knelt, pressing my hand to the soil. It was warmer than the surrounding ground, just slightly, like touching the cheek of someone who'd just woken. Don't, Anya said sharply, pulling my hand away. Let's go. What? It's nothing. I said let's go. Her tone was clipped, unlike her usual calm. We headed back to the car without speaking. The sun was dropping into a wall of cloud, turning the light to dark bronze. At the edge of the forest, I saw an old man in a wool cap standing perfectly still, watching us. As the car rolled past, he didn't blink. In the reflection on the glass, I could have sworn his lips were moving, silently counting 19, 10, 19. I told myself I imagined it, but the image lodged in my mind like a bone caught in my throat. On the third night, Anya said, I want to go inside the fence. You're out of your mind, I told her. The west gate's hinges are broken, she replied, her voice casual, like she was telling me about the weather. I checked. You can just push it open. I pictured our names in a local police report, maybe even mocked in some small column. 2 idiots trespass on Cold War relic. But then I thought about the black scar on the audio spectrum, the warm circle of grass, the way the breathing had made the glass tremble. Fine, I heard myself say. We each brought a flashlight, my recorder, and Anya's handheld pressure sensor. At 2:40 a.m., we slipped through the gap in the west gate, rust smearing our sleeves, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth from a small scratch. Inside, the air felt colder and heavier, like walking into a room that had been sealed for years. Up close, the radome's surface showed faint creases in the composite skin. When the wind shifted, the whole sphere seemed to shiver, like the rise and fall of a belly. We circled the concrete base until we found a narrow service hatch near the ground. Its lock was broken. Anya shone her light inside, a short corridor lined with sheet metal, leading into the hollow interior. No, I said. My mouth was dry. Just a quick look, she whispered. 5 minutes. We crawled in. The air inside had the sterile tang of old fiberglass and concrete. Cold, clean, almost unpleasant. On the floor, concentric rings of concrete about 1.5 meters across circled inward, like the pressure marks left on skin by headphones. In the center stood a square steel frame, stripped of equipment. Cables had been cut, the copper ends oxidized green. Above, the inner skin of the dome arched high overhead, a network of ribs bolted together with rusting fasteners. Anya set the recorder on the frame. I switched on my backup flashlight and angled it upward. 2:58, she said, glancing at her watch. If it gets too loud, we leave. 2:59. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Outside, the wind shifted and the low pressure began to creep up through the floor. The concrete rings seemed to rise and fall, ever so slightly. 3:01. The pressure built. My ears tried to pop, but it didn't help. Anya's sensor jumped a few points, then steadied. The decibel meter showed nothing unusual. Whatever this was, it lived outside the numbers. 3:03. The tone rose inside my body. It felt like a string tied to my liver being pulled tight. The hair on my arms lifted. Something enormous and impossibly slow was moving around us. Not in the air, but in the structure itself. Far away, or maybe right next to me, a voice. No, not a voice, but a pattern shaped like one, brushed the edge of my hearing. Anya's fingers clamped around my wrist. Do you hear? She didn't finish. My flashlight flickered. In one blink, she was 3 meters away, staring straight at me. In the next, she was right beside me, her hand still gripping mine. I spun toward the central frame, and there was a third Anya standing there. Her head was tilted, her lips moving as if she was silently counting. I blinked again. She was gone. Out, I said, but my voice sounded far away, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Out now. Anya didn't answer. I grabbed her arm, thin, solid, warm, and we stumbled toward the service hatch. Our footsteps weren't right. Each of mine had a shadow step a half-beat late, and there was another step, a half-beat ahead of me, as if someone else was walking just in front. We burst out into the open. The wind scraped cold against my face. I gagged, eyes watering from the pressure shift. You okay? I managed. She nodded, and didn't nod. My eyes couldn't settle. Let's go. Wait, she said, her voice oddly flat. I left the recorder. Leave it, I snapped, but she was already turning back toward the hatch, slipping inside, her light vanishing into the dark. The clearing was silent. The dome was just a dead white shell again. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3, up to 60. No Anya. I'm coming in, I called but stopped. From inside came a small metallic click, like a latch being pulled. Cold air slid out of the hatch. Anya! She appeared in the doorway, recorder in hand, her face lit with an odd brightness, like she'd just surfaced from underwater. Let's go, she said. Now. We ran. At the gate, she slipped through first. I pulled the chain link shut behind us, checked my watch. 3:11, my phone. 3:04. In the car, my hands still shook. She plugged in the headphones and scrolled to the 2:58 mark. Her face drained pale, then flushed, then pale again. She passed the headphones to me. I don't want to hear this alone. I pressed play. The dome's breathing filled my ears. The pressure built. At 3:03, something opened, and then my voice, dry, far away, as if recorded down a long corridor. Out. Out now. Immediately after, Anya's voice overlapped itself. One saying wait, the other saying go, just half a beat apart, then merging into a single stretch of pure silence. I don't remember saying wait, she murmured. I remember you saying it, I told her. don't know which you it was. The next morning, Anya didn't come out. She texted me, headache, staying in. I took the recorder to Kopech. He listened without comment until my voice came through. Out. Out. Now. And then he stared out the window. Back then, he said quietly, they tried things they shouldn't have. Not out of malice, out of curiosity. Sometimes the ear hears things the heart can't hold. What was it? I asked. He gave a thin smile. Ever seen a mirror with no reflection? Before mirrors were glass, they were silver, imperfect. Sometimes when you looked in, there was a delay. And the black scar in the spectrum. A place sound can't pass, because something's there. Not a thing. Maybe the edge of a clock. He exhaled. A clever man would give it a pretty name. On my last day, I returned the key to Lyda. She was in the kitchen drying her hands. You think that place is dangerous? I asked. What's dangerous? She replied. People can die from invisible things, gas waves thoughts, but the worst is what it reminds you of. She handed me a small cloth bag. Rye bread. When you get to Szczecin, buy coffee to go with it. And don't go back there at 3 o'clock. I took the midday train back to Berlin. In the subway tunnel under Hermannplatz, a faint pressure brushed my ears, probably just the air. That night, at 3:03, I woke from a dream. I was inside the radome, staring up at the ribs of its shell. One split open, peeling back like tape, and something reached through, not with a shape, but with an absence. Later, I opened the 3:03 recording again. The black scar was still there, perfectly clean. I sent a screenshot to Anya with the message, "You okay?" No reply. The next day she called. "I'm taking time off. Going to Gdansk. The sea's noisy there. Easier to sleep. Will you go back?" Number, you shouldn't either. If you remember the cranes in the afternoon. Don't remember 3:03. All right. Goodbye. Wait, Anya. That night, I saw another you. Did you know? Long silence. Then, I saw another you too. The line went dead. A month later, Kopech emailed. The government would dismantle R14 in winter. Let me know if you want to bolt, he wrote. I typed back. I just want to keep my silence. Instead, I sent, thank you. That night, I didn't wake at 3:03. When I finally checked the file again, the black scar was still there. I zoomed in until each fraction of a second was a pixel. There was nothing between them, only emptiness. And maybe emptiness was the best answer I'd get